Ahoy hoy, I'm PlanOrc, and a few days ago I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw someone had posted some images of Dave Rubin saying something that is actually quite funny. And I mean funny in a, why would you say that kind of funny, not in a, oh, he was being intentionally funny. Now, I'm not going to show you exactly what he said yet, that's for later on, but his statements were about trans people. And despite him not saying much, there was certainly a lot there to unpack, so I decided, why not make a video about Dave Rubin? Now, I do have to address the elephant in the room, because the donkey I don't think is going to complain. Now, when I make videos about trans people or even gay people, one of the comments that I tend to receive is something along the lines of, stick to science. Now, this type of comment does ignore the fact that there is science when it comes to trans people and gay people. It's just not often viewed as science because a whole lot of people have gone and turned it into a big culture war thing. Now, this often means that when people talk about LGBT issues, people from the other side will view what they're saying as completely ideological and not based in reality. Now, keep in mind that this is the exact same as other discussions that we've had on this channel, such as Flat Earth. Flat Earthers will simply say that I'm just repeating the globe ideology and that none of what I say is actually based in science. The difference between Flat Earth and trans issues is that Flat Earth is pretty much unanimously agreed upon by everybody to be completely silly. Therefore, when I talk about Flat Earth, people watching my channel aren't going to tell me to just simply stick to science because yeah, they agree that what I'm talking about is based in science. Now, when it comes to LGBT stuff, yeah, there'll often be a lot more philosophy, but that's because it is often talked about in terms of morality and not science. My point here is that there is science to this stuff, and it's definitely more scientific than some of the other stuff that I have talked about on my channel. If you disagree with that, then it doesn't suddenly make you right and me wrong. I felt like I had to point that out before someone comes along and starts saying, when did you start talking about ideology all of a sudden? I know that I'll still get comments saying that I'm ideologically brainwashed, but, you know, please try listening to my arguments before you angrily type that out. Alright, let's see what Dave Rubin has to say.
How you doing, people? Whether you are a man with male genitalia, a female with female genitalia, a male with female genitalia, a female with male genitalia, a little of everything, or you got nothing, if you're a complete eunuch, you are welcome here on the Rubin Report. I'm Dave Rubin.
Well, that's a good start. Let's hope that he doesn't go ahead and ruin that. I already know that he's going to go ahead and ruin that, but one can be hopeful, right?
Today is going to be a celebration of all things trans. It is coming, it is here, it is everywhere. Trans celebration, Pride Month, the Navy has gone queer. It's bananas, people.
With the way that he said that, I guess he's being facetious. Didn't see that coming.
Today is a tremendous trans celebration here at the Rubin Report. And not only a trans celebration, a celebration of all things woke, all things collective, all of the things that we knew weren't true just a few years ago that we now know are true today, that are being peddled by our political elite and our mainstream media and everything else.
Now, I know what he's going for here. He's going for this angle of, a few years ago, we all knew that this trans wokeness was just untrue. Now everybody is saying that it is true all of a sudden. And why is that? Well, it can't be because it's true, because we all know that it's not actually true, right? But here's the thing, just because a lot of people have changed their minds on something, it doesn't mean that they're wrong about that thing, because people change their minds. In fact, it is often a good thing if you change your mind in the face of new evidence, because that is what a lot of people have done. So it is quite ironic that in his effort to try and make woke people or whatever look bad, that he gives them a trait which is actually a good thing. Also, it should be pointed out that trans people being valid isn't really a new thing, it's just that more people are catching on, so you're seeing it more often.
Okay, so let's talk about what's going on with this more than meets the eye movement, this trans movement that seemingly is being pushed on us from every corner of society right now.
Is it really being pushed on everyone though? For the most part, it's a lot of people going, hey, please respect this group of people. Much like how if you were to say something that is racist, you'll have a lot of people that will say, hey, you shouldn't say something like that because that is pretty racist. Is not being racist being pushed on people now?
Of course, our cold open today was from Dave Chappelle's last Netflix special, and the reason that we threw to that was because Dave Chappelle has been pushing back against this woke trans insanity for a while. He is allowed to make jokes about things. What comedians used to do back in the day was take a topical issue and poke fun at it, using humor to describe a truthful situation so that people could think about things a little bit differently. That's what Chappelle's been doing.
The problem is, though, with some of the jokes that Dave Chappelle makes, he can be misinformed. And when you're being misinformed in the way that Dave Chappelle is, it can be harmful when you have a lot of people listening to you. Now, some people will say, well, it's just jokes. Nobody is going to take jokes seriously. Are you being the joke police now? And in some instances, I would agree. There are some creators like Long Beach Griffey, for example, where I take none of his stuff seriously because all of his stuff is just a joke to me. However, with Dave Chappelle, yes, he's making jokes, but often those jokes are meant to be part of a discussion about society. When he makes a joke about gay people being a minority, right up until they call the cops on him, yes, he's making a joke, but he's also trying to make a point. That is because humor is a really good way to make a point, and that is why so many comedians have talked about societal issues. The reason being is because more people will listen if it's funny. Not a lot of people are going to go to a lecture on critical race theory, but if you talk about it in a comedy show, then you're going to teach a lot more people about it, even if they are kind of mad that you made them think about how racism exists. I've seen people make good points with comedy, but then I've also seen people make absolutely terrible points with comedy. And I've also seen people use comedy as a way to deflect criticisms that they've gotten because they had a bad point. I really don't buy this whole, oh, it's just a joke, so therefore you cannot criticize the statements in them as if it's serious. Because people use jokes all the time to talk about serious issues and to get people thinking about serious issues. And with Dave Chappelle, it's no different. In fact, quite often, Dave Chappelle is trying to talk about serious issues, some of which he actually does have a really good grasp on. It's just that when it comes to trans issues, he doesn't quite have the same understanding as when it comes to things like race. And when you do talk about something that you don't fully understand, then that can be quite harmful because people's opinions are going to be shaped by you.
Here you have Chappelle making jokes about stuff. And by the way, you should be able to make jokes about stuff. You know, if we said, okay, you can't make jokes about gay people, you can't make jokes about black people, you can't make jokes about trans people or anything, you'd have to obliterate absolutely everything.
Or maybe, if you're going to make jokes about a marginalized group of people, especially in a way that's meant to make a statement, maybe actually consult those people to see if your jokes are going to be harmful or not. And if you don't do that, and then afterwards people come along and say, hey, I think that joke is actually quite harmful, maybe actually consider their point of views and think about going, actually, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that joke. In fact, people have called me out on bad taste jokes that I've made in the past, such as when I crossed my eyes. I think it was to represent myself going insane. Now, I can react to that in multiple ways. I could go, why are you so offended? It's just a joke. Maybe you shouldn't be so triggered, snowflake. Or I could take their criticism and go, actually, you know what? Maybe they've got a point. Maybe I shouldn't make that joke. In fact, I don't think that joke was all that funny, especially considering that nobody commented on it to tell me how funny it was. And the thing is, I don't even think that joke was actually meant to be to make a point. Now, admittedly, there are some things that people are offended by that I think are really silly. Like, for example, and people might cancel me over this, so get ready, femboy is not a slur. At least, I don't see it as a slur. Now, there will be people that will agree with me on that, and there will be people that disagree with me on that. You might have some people that say, how could you say femboy? That's just so offensive because it is a slur. And I think that it's silly to call femboy a slur. So yes, sometimes people get mad for silly reasons, but that doesn't mean that every time someone gets mad, it's a silly reason. You have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
But what's happening with the trans thing, that we all seemingly have to bow down to this, that if you do not accept that 4-year-olds who feel a different way, a boy who feels a little bit like a girl, should be on puberty blockers and on their way to becoming the other gender, if you don't buy into all of that, that you're somehow a bigot or mean or anything else.
All right, so there is a bit to unpack here. 4 years old is probably a little bit too young for puberty blockers, especially seeing as I think the earliest that you'd probably start puberty might be 8. And given that, it'd probably be kind of pointless to put someone on puberty blockers at the age of 4, unless they did go through puberty at the age of 4, in which you'd probably put a cis kid on puberty blockers if they started going through puberty at the age of 4. But then there is the question of, if someone identifies as a different gender to the one that they were assigned at birth at such a young age, is that valid? And the answer is yes. And the studies support that. There was a study that was done on about 300 transgender children between the ages of 3 and 12. Now, this study went for about 5 years, and by the end of the study, 94% of them still identified as binary transgender, and only 2.5% of them identified as cisgender. So yeah, if that many youth are still identifying as transgender after 5 years, I think that's a pretty good indicator that their gender identity is indeed valid. But there was a trend that you would expect. The older that they were at the start of the study, the more likely they were to still identify as transgender at the end of the study. So for those that initially socially transitioned before the age of 6, the amount of them that remained binary transgender at the end of the study was 90.3%. The amount of them that identified as cisgender at the end of the study was 5.6%. The rest were non-binary. As for everyone else who initially socially transitioned at the age of 6 or later, the amount of them that remained binary transgender at the end of the study was 96.4%, and only 0.5% of them identified as cisgender. Out of the whole sample, that amounted to 1 person. So yes, out of the 193 people in the study that was 6 or over, only 1 was cisgender by the end. So yes, children are the gender that they identify with. If a child who was transgender says, actually no, I'm cisgender now, then that doesn't invalidate all the transgender children. Also, another thing that I should probably mention about what Dave Rubin said there is he said, oh yeah, a boy that feels a little bit like a girl. That's not what's going on. Like, if you got a boy that's rocking out to Shania Twain, has memorized all the lyrics to all her songs, they're not suddenly rushed off to the gender clinic because they're singing, man, I feel like a woman. There's more to being transgender than simply feeling a little bit like the opposite gender to the one that you're assigned at birth. And I think that a lot of the reason why people have this kind of misconception is because it is very difficult to imagine what it must be like to be transgender, especially if you're cisgender. But just because you find it hard to imagine, it doesn't mean that people that are transgender are suddenly invalid.
Well, all of this nonsense, it's leaking into our military. And this video came out yesterday. We're going to show you a couple of clips of it. This is absolutely insane. This is from the US Navy. I am not kidding you. You're going to be watching this in a second from now, and you're going to go, Dave, that can't be real. This seems like amateur hour from a high school. But this is the US Navy training its staff to create a safe space by using gender pronouns.
Oh no! Respecting people by using their correct pronouns? The shock, the horror, that's not allowed by the US military. I really don't see why you'd complain about that sort of thing, especially when there's probably way better things to complain about the US military doing, but let's see what you got.
Hi, my name is Johnny and I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, and I'm Conchi and I use she, her pronouns.
And we're here to talk about pronouns.
What is a pronoun? A pronoun is how we identify ourselves apart from our name, and it's also how people refer to us in conversations.
Using the right pronouns is a really simple way to affirm someone's identity. It is a signal of acceptance and respect. Instead of saying something like, hey guys, you can say, hey everyone, or hey team.
Yeah, and now that you say that, another way that we could show that we're allies and that we accept everybody is to maybe include our pronouns in our emails, or like we just did, introduce ourselves using our pronouns.
Oh, there's more coming, people. And that's real. I know you're watching it. You're going, that can't be real. Dave, today is not April Fool's Day. Don't punk us like that. But that is real. That is a real video.
So there is only one problem that I have with that video, and that is that I assume that it's a video that's meant to be shown to adults, but it kind of feels like it's a video that's meant to be shown to kids. Like, yeah, fine, sure, criticize it for that. But don't criticize it just because it's talking about pronouns. And actually, now that I think about it, I think I remember having to go to a work and income seminar, and they showed us presentations, and if I remember correctly, it did feel a little bit like it was made for kids, but it was clearly made to be shown to adults, if you get what I mean. The only difference would have been that the video would have been less colourful and the things that they're talking about would have been more adult. But it would have still had the, yeah, you don't really know anything, so we're going to talk to you as if you're a child kind of vibe.
And they're saying things that have nothing to do with the Navy. Didn't the Navy have something to do with a bunch of guys getting in the water and then going to save people, perhaps? Or we blow up something, or...
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Dave, but I'm sure that the Navy is more than just a bunch of guys blowing stuff up. In fact, I've spoken to people who were in the Navy, and I can't remember exactly what they had to do all day, but I do know that they, kind of debunked the flat earth while they were in the Navy. So there was that.
And another tip for you to remember their pronoun next time, it's in your mind. Kind of go through a progression of 3 good things about the person using their pronoun. So let's say the person chooses to use they, then you will in your mind go, they have a nice shirt, they have a nice smile, they are really smart. So that kind of sticks in your brain.
That is.
So yeah, that is actually really good advice. I often accidentally misgender people that go by they them pronouns, and so maybe I should do what was actually suggested in that video to prevent myself from accidentally doing that. I don't know if it will actually work, but it's at least worth trying, right?
Listen, I gotta warn you people. There is collective brain damage happening across the world right now, okay?
You know what? I agree. It's coming from all these people that are getting mad that the Navy has said, respect people's pronouns. I can't believe that the Navy would actually do such a thing.
Imagine you come from a proud naval family and they are subjecting you to that sheer drivel. Not only is it complete insanity, it's just complete insanity that has nothing to do with nothing. It has nothing, certainly nothing to do with the Navy being effective at what your job is, protecting this country, making sure that if a pirate ship is attacking another ship, that you're going to take care of the other ship.
Oh, so actually getting along with the people that you're going to work with, especially if you're out on the sea for a long period of time, is not going to help you be more effective, is it, Dave? I would also guess that people in the Navy are also told things like, don't be racist. Would Dave object to them being told that because it has nothing to do with them being in the Navy?
We were talking about pronouns, and somebody was disagreeing with how different people see themselves as different pronouns, and the argument was, if you look like a female, then it's she, her, because that's what's normal, and if you make me call you something else, then you're infringing on my rights. And I was really taken aback by the comment, and I really wasn't sure how to respond, and the only thing I could really think quickly to say was, it's not about you at all, and it's mostly and ultimately about respect.
But if I were to tell you over and over again, my name is Johnny, and you insist on mispronouncing my name, I would feel disrespected by you.
He makes a really good point there. Multiple times I've told people my name, and they've just insisted on calling me something that I do not feel comfortable with them calling me. It is really annoying and frustrating when people do that. Like, let's say that your name is John, and you tell someone, hi, my name's John, and they say, oh, hi, Johnny. And you're like, no, just John, I do not like being called Johnny. And they're like, I'm just going to call you Johnny, though. It would feel really disrespectful, right? Because they are ignoring how you feel about what they call you. It's almost like when people just insist on calling you something derogatory, and you're like, yeah, you just don't respect me, do you? But don't worry, everyone, I do give you permission to call me Planafart if you want to. I don't know if YouTube will give you permission to do that, though.
Some names are very difficult to pronounce, but do you know what is very easy to pronounce? She, he, they.
Let's be clear about something. Let's be clear. That's what Joe Biden says all the time. Let's be clear. She, he, them are fucking bananas. Those people are insane. You don't have to behave the way these people want. They're not real human beings. And what I mean by that is they have no understanding of what it is to get and earn respect and to be an adult in a world that doesn't have to bow to you, a world that exists, and then you do your best within that world.
Mate, Dave. It's about basic respect. Like, when you meet someone, you don't greet them with, hey, fuckface. No, you don't, because that would be disrespectful to them. Everyone deserves a basic level of respect. Like, you're not being told to get on your knees and then bow and worship the ground that they walk upon. No, you're just being told use their preferred pronouns.
But you also may be watching this and going, Dave, you don't understand. You're not a Gen Z. You know, you're not a millennial. You're not one of the young kids of the day. These things are very important, the pronouns, the she, he, the they, zer, all of it. It's very important. You're old, man. You're 45. I'm going to be 46 this Sunday, by the way. It's my birthday.
I'm probably a week late, but happy birthday.
You're an old timer now. You don't understand the importance of transsexual gender pronouns. And the thing is, guys, I learned about this. I learned about this years ago from the original Transformers.
Okay, so I'll admit that sometimes when I make a joke, it will be really shoehorned in. And one of the things I've noticed is that generally when I make these kinds of jokes, they're just not funny, and so I end up usually removing them. Unless, of course, it's something like a joke that is meant to appeal to a very niche section of my audience that I want to see, I wonder how many people in my audience know who Will Wood is, or something like that. And in that instance, well, better than the alternative. See, I just did it. Shoehorned in a joke that probably barely anyone is going to get, and people are going to go, that's not funny. And then people are going to cancel me on Twitter for telling an unfunny joke. You're not supposed to criticize people for telling jokes. All that to say is, I'm kind of an expert on shoehorning in jokes. Not my proudest achievement, but yeah, Dave, that was really shoehorned in. So here's some advice, not just for Dave, but for anyone really. And that is, sometimes you'll come up with a joke and you'll just have to shoehorn it into something. But then when you shoehorn it in, it just becomes 10 times less funny. Like, just write it down and keep it for later if you have to shoehorn it in, because it's better to just keep it for a time when it will actually be funny, rather than just shoehorning it in. And yeah, I get that you can tell or use a joke multiple times. In fact, I've done that myself. Oops. But it has to be funny the first time for it to be funny successive times. Also, I need to point out that he does use the term transsexual, and not a lot of people use that term to describe themselves. Some do, but most people just use the term transgender.
We are just being inundated with absolute drivel, but enough of us are starting to laugh at it, mock it, and now in this case actually fight against it.
I agree, and that is why this is the 4th video concerning trans issues that I've made this year. Look, I only made 2 videos about trans issues last year, so this is a step up, okay? I actually didn't expect to make this many videos about trans issues. I just thought that, I'll laugh a couple of times at Matt Powell and that'll be it. But no, I'm being inundated with drivel, so I made more videos than I expected. This is because a lot of people don't understand trans issues, like Dave Rubin. And people will go, oh, but Planet Walk, you don't actually understand trans issues. And I guarantee you that I understand trans issues way better than Dave Rubin does. This is because I've actually talked to trans people, and whilst doing so, I haven't held an anti-trans bias that has caused me to dismiss a lot of what they have to say. It is easy to point to a crazy trans person on the internet and make it seem like it's an unreasonable demand to use the pronouns that they want you to use. But in reality, it's more unreasonable to not use the correct pronouns because it's a very simple request that's being made of you. If you use someone's incorrect pronouns, well, it can trigger gender dysphoria. So yeah, there's really no reason why you shouldn't use someone's preferred pronouns. And if you disagree with that, then you probably don't understand trans issues that well.
So I am now going to show you a video from California. So I do have to put money in the jar. But this is actually quite spectacular. This is a Californian mother. Her name is Erin Friday. And she's a lefty. She's a liberal. She'll make the point in just a moment. And she has basically had it with what's going on related to all of the gender nonsense and the fact that Gavin Newsom, psychopath Gavin Newsom, wants California to become a gender sanctuary state so that kids in other states can move there to have their genitals and boobs cut off. Take a look.
Kids aren't having their genitals and boobs cut off. Stop saying that. The worst thing that happens to kids is circumcision, which is bad and shouldn't happen unless it's medically necessary. Like, I need to have a jar like Dave Rubin has, where every time someone says that, I just put $5 in there, but if I did that, I'd eventually have no money left to spend. Now, I would start a thing where every time someone says something like this, you gotta give me a super chat or a super thanks, but it's important that you guys have money to survive as well. So yeah, probably not the best idea, but we do have to think of something.
Hi, my name's Erin Friday. I'm a Democrat and I voted for same-sex marriage. I'm one of the leads of Our Duty and parents of ROGD kids.
Okay, so for those that do not know, RODG means Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria. Now the reason why this term exists is because a study was done. The study was absolutely terrible, very bad methodology. I'm actually going to devote a pseudoscience papers to it. Basically what it claims is that groups of kids that had no prior signs of gender dysphoria all of a sudden have gender dysphoria and that they come out as trans. This is a study that a lot of people point to when they're trying to push the "they're transing the kids" narrative. And because the study was primarily asking mothers and didn't ask the children at all, you know, mothers might miss signs that their child has gender dysphoria. As great and supportive as some parents may be, they're not necessarily the most perceptive when it comes to their children. Or in my case, they're perceptive to the point where they'd see things that don't actually exist. Now, I would play a bit of the song "My Whole Family Thinks I'm Gay," but copyright and stuff. But anyway, when it comes to rapid onset gender dysphoria, the data was gathered in the worst way. However, subsequent studies have shown that it doesn't exist.
There are thousands of parents in our group. We are cheering on the states that are stopping gender medicine on children. Parents in the state of California have lost custody of their children merely by calling their child by their legal name.
So I literally made a tweet earlier before I had even watched this saying, "Names are immutable. If you get married, I will not use your new last name. You want me to call you Liz? I'm sorry, but it is a biological fact that your name is Elizabeth, and I will not call Felix PewDiePie." Now obviously that was a joke to poke fun at people that insist on using trans people's dead names, like when people insist on calling Elliot Page by his dead name. And honestly, it's not hard to use people's preferred names. Yeah, it can take a bit of getting used to, but you get used to it. For example, I've got a gender fluid friend who prefers their name to be shortened most of the time. So, rather than using their long name, I've gone, okay, yeah, I'm going to try and make sure that I use your short name. Now, when it comes to parents, yes, they should use their child's preferred name, especially when not doing that triggers gender dysphoria. Now, obviously, there is the question of should parents lose custody of their children if they purposely and repeatedly dead name them? I'm not sure about that, but I feel like it should come down to what the child prefers. Like, if the child does not like the fact that their parents are repeatedly dead naming them and possibly even misgendering them, I think that the child should get to choose, hey, I don't want to live with my parents anymore. In that case, I think that it's very justifiable that the parents lose custody of the child.
SB 107 must not pass. Custody is one of the hardest fought aspects of a divorce, and California cannot just wipe away an out-of-state agreement addressing which parent controls the medical health of a child.
So I think that the custody of the child should go to the person that is going to give the child the healthcare that they need, not the anti-vaxxer. Not the anti-puberty blockers person.
Scott Wiener, a man without children, is pushing gender-affirmative medicine laws for minors, while other countries are moving away from the affirmation model.
Just because some countries are moving away from the affirmation model doesn't mean that it's a bad model. Some countries have outlawed gay marriage. That doesn't make gay marriage bad.
The number of kids going to gender clinics is skyrocketing. In the UK, it is a 5,000% uptick for girls, as seen in the graph. It's the same here. We parents know it's a social contagion as we watch clusters of friend groups come out as trans.
Of course she would say that, especially with that fucking book right there by Abigail Shrier, which I made some comments about in my video on Bill Maher, which people took issue with. When I said that I think that it's okay for people to want to prevent the spread of books, I did not mean that I think that it's okay to just completely ban books. And to expand on that, books don't have a right to get published. Like, if you go and give your book to a publisher, they don't have to publish your book. Now, when a publisher thinks that the book that you have written is good enough, they'll go ahead and publish the book. And you've got a published book now. Congratulations. But if a publisher later decides, wait, maybe we shouldn't publish this book, then they do not have to continue publishing your book. That is their right. Now, if you convince a publisher to stop publishing a book, that is one way that you could prevent circulation of a book. That's not banning a book, it's just a company deciding, well, it's not in our best interests to publish this book. If a publisher stops publishing your book, there will always be some company out there willing to publish your book. You just have to, find it. Another way of preventing circulation of books is by convincing people that the book is bad and not to get it, and then people will not get it as much. But anyway, she says that so many more young people are seeking gender-affirming care. Yes, because it's more normal to be transgender these days. When you remove the stigma around something, more people will do or be that thing. It's happened with gay people, it's happened with atheists, and now it's happening with transgender people. It's just the way that things happen. This does not mean that it's a social contagion. Yeah, a couple of people will identify as transgender simply because they want to fit in, and that should probably be discouraged. But that does not in any way justify dead naming, misgendering, or taking away healthcare from trans children who need it.
If trans medicine prevents suicide, why then, as trans medicine gets more prevalent, are more girls committing suicide?
Correlation does not mean causation.
Okay, so there's obviously some serious stuff here, but the funny stuff first. The guy who is pushing this in California, he's a representative, congressman, a Democrat, of course, and as she said, his name is Scott Wiener. Wiener.
Okay, that is pretty funny. This actually kind of does seem like we've got a cast of characters from a sitcom. You got Aaron Friday, there's probably some joke there. You've got Scott Wiener, that's pretty funny. Yeah, he's got a point.
The man who is creating a sanctuary state for people, young children, to come and get their wieners chopped off is named Wiener.
Dave, stop saying that. We haven't yet figured out what we're going to do when someone says something like that. You see why I said that I'd have no money to spend if I had to put money into a jar, right?
Joking aside, this woman, as she points out, she's a Democrat, so she's been misguided politically, let's say, but she voted for same-sex marriage. She's obviously not a bigot. She is not a racist person or a right-wing maniac or alt-right. She's probably not a Trump supporter or anything else.
You don't have to be racist to be transphobic, right? You don't even have to be homophobic to be transphobic. There are plenty of TERFs that I genuinely don't think that they are racist or homophobic, but they're still transphobic.
She is a liberal who has been mugged by reality, which is pretty much everyone in America right now.
I'd say that she's been misguided into believing that trans people don't need healthcare for their gender dysphoria. And the reality is that trans people do need healthcare for their gender dysphoria, as much as people try to take that right away.
It has morphed into something horrific. And that thing that it has morphed into is now fully and wholly infected the Democrat Party.
Now, I'm not up to date with the Democrats' stance on transgender issues. I do know that AOC seems to be in favour, but not sure about the rest of them. So let me know in the comments if they are all in favour or something. From what I've heard about the Democrat Party, I kind of doubt it.
Which is why a guy by the name of Scott Wiener is now pushing for California to be a sanctuary state for kids to come and have their gender changed. And of course, you cannot actually change your gender. You can change your body, but you cannot change your sex, your biological sex.
Sex and gender are not the same thing. Please stop saying that. When someone says that they're changing gender, they're not saying that, oh yeah, we're gonna change my chromosomes around. What they usually mean is that they're going to try and change some of their sex characteristics, not always though, and that they are going to adopt different gender roles. So because gender is different to sex, you can change your gender. Now, of course, there are different aspects of gender like gender roles, gender identity, and gender expression. Gender identity, I think it's probably harder to change because that is based on neurochemistry. Obviously, that is one of the core parts of gender. Quite often, your gender expression and your gender roles are reflective of your gender identity.
Interestingly, I'm just seeing this right now. Thanks for the heads up on this. Erin Friday, that woman right there, her daughter detransitioned, meaning her daughter transitioned to become a boy, and then at some point along the road, actually now went back to being a girl.
And that does happen. Sometimes people realize that transitioning isn't right for them, and so they detransition. Detransitioners do have unique struggles that they need to face, but that doesn't negate the struggles of transgender people.
And again, as I pointed out on the show yesterday, if you think that everything can be solved by science, meaning if a young boy really thinks he's a girl or a young girl really thinks he's a boy, if you think everything can be solved by science, meaning give them puberty blockers, give them testosterone so they can be more boyish, give them estrogen to be more girlish, why wouldn't you, if you have a young boy who wants to be a girl, maybe give him more testosterone so he could maybe feel like more of a man? Wouldn't that possibly make more sense? I'm not even saying it does. I honestly don't understand the full science of all of this. But what is the push for all of this? We all know it's insane.
So Dave Rubin, who admits that he doesn't actually know all the science, his solution for people that were assigned male at birth who are going through gender dysphoria is to give them more testosterone. So I spent way too long looking into this, so there are a few factors that we need to consider. The first being the brain. So when it comes to transgender women, their brain is very similar to that of a cis woman. When it comes to transgender men, then their brain is very similar to that of a cis man. And many of these aspects of the brain are developed in utero, so this means that they're developed before you're even born. Now the next question is, do hormones play a role in the structure of your brain? And the answer is actually yes. Testosterone does seem to make the brain more masculine, and estrogen seems to make it more feminine. However, this effect is not uniform, meaning testosterone has more of an impact on some parts of the brain and less of an impact on other parts of the brain. So this means that, let's say hypothetically, we did do what Dave Rubin suggests and give someone who is gender dysphoric and was assigned male at birth testosterone, it may not necessarily work out in a good way. There's no guarantee that it will fix their gender dysphoria, and certain parts of the brain will be more masculine whilst other parts of the brain will be more feminine. And not only that, you may end up making the body a whole lot more masculine with a brain that didn't want to be masculine to begin with. And this means that if the gender dysphoria does persist, well, it's a lot worse now because you've made the body a whole lot more masculine. But the second thing is, well, what if low hormone levels is causing gender dysphoria in a lot of people? Problem is that there's no evidence to suggest this. Now, I did try to find studies of hormone levels on pre-HRT transgender people, however, I just couldn't find any. Although chances are, if you're a trans person on HRT, you probably had to do a blood test to find out what your hormone levels were before starting HRT. It is also for checking things like cholesterol levels to make sure they're safe. Hot tip, do not get your blood tests done immediately after Christmas if it's for things like HRT, because your cholesterol levels might be a little higher than normal. I know that because a friend of mine encountered that issue. But because of that, I think it would be worth doing a study just to check what are the hormone levels of pre-HRT trans people. It would actually be rather interesting to find that out. But the last thing is about Dave Rubin's suggestion. Should we actually do a study to test whether Dave Rubin's suggestion might actually work? And the answer to that, of course, is no! You see, in science there's this thing called ethics. You shouldn't do experiments that are considered unethical. So an experiment like, let's say, telling people who have never smoked cigarettes to smoke cigarettes to check the addictiveness of them, that would be quite unethical as it can have negative health effects. So if you're to tell people with gender dysphoria that we're going to do an experiment, but we're going to need you to stay the gender that you currently are in order to run that experiment, well, we know that gender dysphoria is not good for mental health. Even if there is a chance that later that gender dysphoria may be alleviated, there is also a chance that it might make it way worse. And not to mention that there is a treatment that does work. It is allowing people to transition to the gender that they identify with. And you know what's ironic? Dave Rubin actually kind of seems like the person that would say something like, puberty blockers are just experimental and we shouldn't be experimenting on children. Whereas his treatment would also be experimental and would be experimenting on children. Except that puberty blockers have been used a lot longer than just giving children hormones. Anyway, this video has gone on for a long time, so let's have one last take from Dave Rubin. What you got for us, Dave?
But there are some sane people out there. You know Jordan Peterson. He tweeted this. I thought it was quite succinct. California, haven for the medical butchery of minors. And it really is as simple as that. That is what California will become under Gavin Newsom. They will have 8-month abortions. So you'll be killing children. Then you'll be chopping off children's genitals.
Dave, please stop saying that wrong thing because we still haven't figured out what we're going to do. And I certainly can't afford to put $5 into a jar every time I hear someone talk about chopping off kids' genitals. Now, he brings up Jordan Peterson, and there's a whole rabbit hole with what's been going on with him recently. I could make a video on what's happened, but I feel like I'd just be repeating most of the stuff that I've already said in this video. But if that is something that you would like to see, leave a comment, especially considering that I do plan on making a video defending something that Jordan Peterson said a long time ago. But it's more saying how something that Jordan Peterson said was quite misinterpreted, and even if we try to justify Jordan Peterson's stance, it doesn't really work. Jordan Peterson is like that sometimes. You can sometimes justify the things that he says, but you gotta know a bit more about what he's talking about than what he actually mentions about what he's talking about. Unless, of course, it's the tweet that Dave Rubin showed, in which case it's just factually incorrect. Anyway, I'm going to leave this video here, but I do want to mention that I am considering setting up an open debate on this, because I do think that people that disagree with me are incorrect. I feel like a lot of people have been misled about trans people because it has been made this culture war talking point. And when it's a culture war talking point, often misinformation has been spread. People often don't hear the opposing point of view, which will lead them to think that the opposing point of view must be ridiculous because the people that they hear the opposing point of view from are the people that are saying that it's ridiculous. So if you disagree with me, let me know and I'll try and set something up. But with that, I will see you in the next video. Between you and me, thank you for watching.